Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game. So today I got a fun and exciting episode for you guys today because we're going to be going over more MAME updates. Now the .275 is out, that is what I am testing this on. I wanted to take a look at another arcade board to see just how well it is doing in MAME. Last video we did the Konami Hornet. We found that so many games were playable and preserved for all time. So we're going to be doing the same thing today for the Konami GTI CLUB class hardware, starting off with Solar Assault. And just so you know, this is basically Solar Assault Revised, but it's the North American version of the game, so it just goes by Solar Assault. And there's so many good games on the Konami GTI CLUB class hardware, but it is strange it didn't get a name. There's Hornet, there's Cobra, there's Viper, there's Tarantula, but this one just never got a bug or a snake name. But it really doesn't matter because the games here are awesome, and as far as Solar Assault is concerned, it is running absolutely perfectly in my opinion in MAME. I did a video about this maybe a year ago when it finally stopped having a freezing issue, and since then there's definitely been some improvements in recent updates to MAME. Just so you are aware, these aren't all .275 updates. I'm just doing the cumulative as the last I've looked at it, and it is fun to have something like this working in MAME because if you want to buy a Solar Assault board, you're talking a look at like $1,500 plus for this thing actually running, and it is quite a rare board. You're basically going to have to hunt for years to find an original copy of it. I know that because I am still looking for one myself. I have a different board that can play it, but it's one of those things. This might not be to the Sega Model 2 level of arcade hardware, but this was Konami's first attempt at fully texture mapped 3D hardware for the arcades. Their first 3D board basically was the Polygonette Commander board, and while that was fun, it was all flat shaded polys, kind of like Sega Model 1. But as far as this board in MAME is concerned, so many of the issues since the last time I looked at it have been completely buttoned up. The audio here seems perfect, the controls and responsiveness are there, the frame rate's exactly what it would be in the arcades. But just so you are aware, the frame rate's going to be dependent on what spec system you have. I'm running an i9-12900K at 5.4 GHz with an overclock, but if you're running a potato CPU, you might not see the exact same performance. So that is the one thing about the 3D hardware emulation on the Konami side of things. You need to bring a decent CPU along for the ride, something modern with a good single core performance. That way you're going to get these frame rates. And as far as the audio is concerned, go ahead and listen, and I'll be right back. The sound effects, the music there sound exactly like they should on real hardware and on the soundtrack, and that is great because what we find with some of the Konami 3D hardware is the performance is 100% or very close to, but sometimes the audio can have a little bit of clipping or a little bit of basically repeating itself because the audio emulation isn't perfect. Now moving on to a game that is definitely much improved since the last time I took a look at it, this is GTI CLUB. Now this game always ran in MAME, but the last time I talked about MAME updates, maybe last year in the spring, you'd have an issue with the handbrake. This game has a full handbrake, so you can basically just slide into the turns, and that handbrake would randomly turn on with no button input. Basically, the analog to digital conversion within the emulation and even on real boards could sometimes have a problem, and it would throw that handbrake on when you didn't request it, and that would basically make actually running a race impossible because all of a sudden you'd be taking a corner or on a straightaway, and that handbrake would engage even though you didn't press any buttons, and you would basically grind to a halt. Now that is completely fixed up recently, and that makes GTI CLUB 100% playable, and this is one of my favorite deep cut hidden gem arcade racing games of all time. I can't stress enough just how much fun the entire GTI CLUB franchise is, and it all gets its start here on the Konami GTI CLUB board, and that is why this board granted that name. It was the first game to run on the hardware, so as opposed to giving it a bug or a snake name, Konami just said it's the GTI CLUB board and we're going to run with that. It's a very short game. You can see the entirety of what this thing has to offer in like 12 minutes tops, but even if it doesn't have a ton of content, it is an awesome racing game, and I love the overall rally nature of it. And once you get into the very hard mode, basically this entire map opens up, and you can take as many shortcuts, jumps, and little paths as you want to try to get first place. It is just 12 minutes of straight up arcade perfection in my opinion, and again now with MAME it's going to be 100% playable, so that so far is 2 out of 4 games on the board that you can just sit down on MAME MAME and play, and that is absolutely spectacular because again, this hardware is not very common whatsoever, and it can be prone to having issues, especially on the RAM. You have a lot of failed RAM on these boards, and you'll either get graphical corruption or you'll get the game not booting at all on real hardware. So it takes a deft hand to keep these things alive, and because you're not really going to find many for sale right now, it's something that MAME is going to make them playable into the future when you can't actually find the hardware, because I checked eBay right now before I did the voiceover, and there is not a single working GTI Club board for any game out there right now, which means that if you even want to buy one of these things, you have to be patient. And that is how I classify rarity. If you can go online and buy it now, even if it's expensive, it's not that rare. But if you want to buy one for any price and you can't find one for sale, that's what really denotes rarity in my opinion. I love all the shortcuts in this game. It just 100% hits, and even if it's not the best 3D hardware, it looks great as well. And it's got an awesome soundtrack that seems perfect, so go ahead and listen, and I'll be right back. Sounds good to my ears. Now moving on to the third game on the GTI Club hardware. This is Operation Thunder Hurricane, and it is absolutely like some B-list jank, fun military light gun shooting in the best way possible. When I took a look at this game last time, it ran from start to finish, but the pixelation on all of the actual textures was basically like looking at dinner plate sized pixels. Some of the filtration that the board seems to be able to do was not yet put into MAME, but now in most recent updates, you're going to see that the graphics definitely have some decent filtering going on. Sure, it's going to be blurry, sure the textures aren't going to look amazing, because that's because this was 1996 hardware and a 1997 game, so you can't expect graphical perfection, but it is so improved since the last time I actually played Operation Thunder Hurricane. Because when I first reviewed this game using MAME, I said it was ugly as sin, and now I would just say it's a little bit homely, but after 3 beers you might start thinking it's attractive. All jokes aside, this is a ton of fun. It's not going to rival the best of Sega or Namco, but it gets relatively close, and it definitely is just trying to be something like Gunblade New York from Sega, except on Konami hardware. This game performs absolutely perfectly in my opinion. The graphics look like they should, the frame rate is there, the controls are there, and you really can just sit down and play this game from start to finish without absolutely any issues whatsoever, and that really is how I classify playable. Maybe there are still a few glitches in the graphics. You can see here some of the textures do some strange things, but if you can sit down and play the game from start to finish at full speed without absolute graphical corruption, it is a playable experience and it is worth your time. And this game has a fun soundtrack as well, and it's the third game that has perfect audio on MAME, so go ahead and listen just for 35 seconds, but I got one more game to show you, and we'll see if it works. From the sound effects to the music, it just sounds exactly like Operation Thunder Hurricane should sound, so that is another absolute win for MAME. That is one of the things. Sometimes you'll get good emulation on the video side and performance side of things, but you get a lot of issues in the audio. Either it's corrupted or it's clipping, or it doesn't work whatsoever. So combining both together, that is how you know this overall emulation implementation is MAME is doing so well. Those explosions have a little bit of a seam in the texture, so there is a little bit of adjusting to do here, because on real hardware there's a tiny bit of a seam where you can kind of see them putting the texture up, but it isn't as wide. But honestly, if that's the type of pixel peeping I'm doing, you know the emulation quality is good, because you would probably never know that that wasn't supposed to be there unless I told you about it. So as far as Operation Thunder Hurricane is concerned, you can play it today. You can do 1-player, 2-player, you can see the credits scroll, you can have all the fun with it you want, and trust me, it definitely is a deep cut game that deserves more attention, and it is one that you can play in MAME today. And if you know where there's an arcade cabinet for this one, let me know, because all the games on this list basically are extinct in arcades, at least as North America is concerned. Now moving over to the last game that we know runs on the GTI Club class hardware, this is Jet Wave, or Wave Shark depending on what region you're in. Now interestingly, there could be a 5th game that runs on this hardware. There is a game that Konami was showing off at some shows in Japan, basically their arcade expo there, and it was called Skiers High. There were 4 cabinets made, it's never been seen since, and there's some thought as to whether it runs on something like the GTI Club hardware or the Konami Hornet. Nobody really knows because no one's seen the insides of the arcade cabinet, nor is there any gameplay footage of it, but it is one of those lost games that we know existed at least at one point in time, so technically there could be a 5th game running on the Konami GTI Club class hardware. But obviously when we take a look at a jet skiing game here, Jet Wave, you can see that it's working just like all the other games. So the fun result of this test is all the games known to exist on the GTI Club hardware work in MAME. They work at full speed, they've got great audio, they are 100% playable. That means the entirety of the Konami GTI Club games are preserved for all time for anyone to enjoy them, because all of Konami's 3D arcade hardware is rare, but it seems like the GTI Club boards are probably some of the rarest outside of the Konami Cobra, where there's 6 known to exist, and I own one that is broken. It is just one of those things. I absolutely love MAME, because even though I hugely collect real hardware, especially on the arcade side of things, I don't expect anyone else to be dumb enough like I am to go out and spend all this time and money on these janky Konami 3D games that are fun but not as pretty as Sega or Namco. For the large majority of you, if you want to experience these games, you want to go straight to emulation, and now as of the most recent version of MAME, every single one of these 100% plays, and because we got updates in MAME 0.274 to the analog controls on the GTI Club board, including Jet Wave right here, you're going to get a situation where they've basically been made playable recently. Sure, Solar Assault was good, and Operation Thunder Hurricane was good as a few versions ago, but this is a very recent development where I can say you can pick any single game on the board you want to play, sit down in MAME on the most recent version, and just enjoy yourself like you're in the arcade minus not being behind a cabinet. If you have your own MAME cabinet build, then it really does feel like you're just in the arcades. But if you like this series, give me another board to research to see how good the games are running. I really enjoy making these, especially on the 3D side of things, so maybe you'll see more in the future. But all these games work. We're done. I'm going to run out of time, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.